And we are going to go over to Russell now, who's going to talk a little bit about the Newdow case and let us know the latest.
Okay. Well, generally, of course, we are moving away from doing so much news on this show, leaving that for the audio show, The Nonprofits.
Exactly.
But this week, the Atheist news was so heavily dominated by one particular story that it seemed appropriate to bring it up. As you know, Michael Newdow stood before the justices of the Supreme Court on Wednesday, pointed to one of the courtroom's two American flags, and declared, "I am an atheist. I don't believe in God." And from all accounts, Michael Newdow is really kicking butt.
Yeah, I've read one or two different articles, and yeah, he's getting applause in the courtroom.
Yeah, I mean,
some good things. Let's
be realistic about this. Most people want him to lose this case.
Yes.
I mean, there's no question about that.
Yeah.
And you know, a number of the justices on the Supreme Court may be already leaning in favor of making him lose the case in whatever way they can think of. But still, I mean, apparently Newdow is an incredibly personable guy, and from everything that I've heard, and I've seen him on talk shows, and he seems like a pretty interesting character. You know, he's representing himself as a lawyer. He actually has law training, but he currently works as an emergency room doctor.
Yeah. Yeah.
What a loser! He dropped out of that original field. Underachiever.
I saw it it's a special circumstance where they're allowing him to defend himself, or you know, be his own lawyer in this case. Essentially, they wouldn't normally allow that, or because he hasn't been practicing long enough, something along those lines.
Right.
But yeah, from my understanding, even the justices who are against him, in terms of most likely going to be voting to keep the pledge as is, were kind of pointing out that, you know, he really holds himself well.
Yeah,
he makes really good arguments.
And you know, the case when the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled in favor of him, the rationale that they used was pretty much impeccable from our point of view.
Yeah. Yeah.
Here are a few excerpts from the trial. When Dr. Newdow described under God as a divisive addition to the pledge, Chief Justice William Rehnquist asked him what the vote in Congress had been 50 years ago when the phrase was inserted. The vote was unanimous, Dr. Newdow said. Well, that doesn't sound divisive, the Chief Justice observed. Dr. Newdow shot back, that's only because no atheist can get elected to public office. The courtroom audience broke into applause, an exceedingly rare event that left the Chief Justice temporarily nonplussed. He appeared to collect himself for a moment and then sternly warned the audience that the courtroom would be cleared if there's any more clapping.
I like that. Hang on a minute. You're not supposed to be clapping for that.
Good job, Mike.
Yeah.
Later on, he made an argument which I think pretty much sums up why he's there in court talking about this, why this case had to come to court in the first place. It remained unclear whether Dr. Newdow persuaded the justices, but he was obviously prepared for the arguments. He told the justices, "I'm saying that I, as her father," he's talking about his daughter in school, "have a right to know that when she goes into the public schools, she's not going to be told every morning to stand up, put her hand over her heart, and say, 'Your father is wrong,' which is what she's told every morning." Well, she does have a right not to participate, Justice Sandra Day O'Connor observed. Dr. Newdow said opting out was a huge imposition to put on a small child, and he continued, "Government is doing this to my child. They're putting her in a milieu where she says, 'Hey, the government is saying that there is a God, and my daddy says no,' and that's an injury to me."
Yeah. Yeah. It also goes into that almost coercive nature of assuming you don't do anything, it's going to be assumed that you believe.
Right.
You have to go along with this unless you're willing to put yourself up in front of everybody and say, "I don't believe this, and I think you're all wrong."
Exactly. So. But my point of view, and this is probably a lot to ask of a kid, but my point of view when it comes to the adults out there who may feel like they're coerced into either pretending to believe in God or just, trying to avoid the subject very studiously is we ought to be speaking up more. And that's the topic that I'd like to talk about today, which is standing up for yourself as an atheist.
Yeah.
It's something that I think people don't do enough of, and it's something that we try to do just by having this show. You know as well as anyone that when people a lot of times call in, they say, why do you even have a show? What are you doing, trying to convert people to atheism?
Yeah.
My point of view is, no, we're not trying to convert people to atheism. In fact, when people set out to specifically convert somebody to something, I think that's obnoxious.
Yeah.
I mean, I am irritated by a Christian who just walks up to me and said, "Hey, have you heard the good news about Jesus?" Now, some people would argue that just to fight back, we ought to be going around spreading the word of atheism. Hey, have you heard the good news? There is no, there is no God.
It's all just made up.
I think that's taking it a little bit far.
You're no one.
I mean, if I think it's rude behavior coming from anybody else, then why would I do it?
Exactly.
On the other hand,
playing devil's advocate.
No, I'm not playing devil's advocate. This is really what I think now.
Okay.
When people hear about what atheism is, it's usually because it usually comes from people in the church or people writing, writing from the pulpit to the general public in mass-produced articles, saying, this country is going to hell because of all these atheists who have evil in their hearts and are going to destroy the world and abolish religion.
Yeah. Stamp it out in all public forms.
Yeah, and what we say is, if we're not going to tell people what atheists are like, who are they going to hear it from?
Yeah,
those guys.
Yeah.
Atheists, I think there's no arguing that actually being an atheist is a marginalized position in this culture. But the fact that it's marginalized is sort of self-fulfilling, because the more marginalized we get, the more atheists are kind of afraid to bring up the fact that they are atheists.
Yeah.
We're embarrassed. Everybody hears all the time, atheists are evil. They're only atheists because they want to do bad things and they don't want to feel like there's a God oppressing them. Yeah. And, saying you're an atheist would bring up a need to make a bunch of embarrassing explanations, and a lot of people just don't want to make the effort.
Yeah.
But by not making the effort, of course, we're letting them get away with that and making ourselves more marginalized.
Yeah.
And that's why I think that it's important to go ahead and stand up for ourselves. So when somebody comes up to you and says, "Hey, can I tell you about Jesus?" you have a right to take that as an open invitation to discuss their beliefs and discuss your beliefs with them.
Yeah.
And I realize that's scary for a lot of people, which is why I didn't say you have an obligation, although I thought about that.
Of course.
People, for instance, you'll have coworkers who constantly forward all kinds of sappy emails.
Yeah.
And you would think that if they knew that you're an atheist, then they would stop doing that because it's annoying.
Well, that would be the polite thing to do.
That would be the polite thing to do.
But the realistic thing is they're going to send you even more.
Right, because they're like, "Hey, oh, that poor person, he's an atheist.
Yeah. He apparently hasn't heard of Jesus before."
Yes. Right. As if anybody hasn't heard of Jesus in our culture. Come on. But, all he needs is someone to reach out to him and tell him the truth. Now, I am totally for free speech. Go ahead, reach out to me. But do not be surprised when I answer you.
Yeah, when I reach back.
It reminds me of something we were talking about way back in 2001, after the terrorist attacks occurred on September 11th. Okay. An editorial came out, if you recall, where the basic content was, thank goodness all the atheists have shut up since September 11th. Thank goodness we're not hearing from them anymore.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not sure that was actually true, but if it was, I have a theory, which is that, believe it or not, a lot of atheists were just too polite to
essentially rub it in.
To rub it in, yes. I mean, let's be practical here. We know a lot of people are theists, and we know that the nation was in a grieving period at that time, and when a lot of people have just died, maybe it's a time to go ahead and let people find comfort in their imaginary friend, and not jump in their face and say, hey, that imaginary friend you're praying to isn't real.
Exactly.
You moron.
Exactly. Which is actually an important distinction, because a lot of religions typically go after people who are in that position.
Yes.
You have school children, you have people in the hospital.
People who are vulnerable.
People, exactly, who are vulnerable. You go and talk to them, because they're going to be the easy ones to convince. Because they want to believe
it's not just something religions do, it's something con artists do.
Exactly.
You'll see con artists go into this long spiel about how most people retire, or most people can't retire, and they die in poverty, and they're living hand to mouth. They can't afford anything. But
therefore, give me $40,000, and I'll make sure you can retire.
Yeah. So, some atheists anyway are polite.
Yeah. And like I said, I do remember a lot around that time. They had certain things going around, messages going around saying, thank God and God protect us and blah, blah, blah. Right. And it's kind of a bad time to go stick your finger in the wound and twist it around a couple times saying, no, he's not really there. So,
and there's nothing wrong with being polite.
Yeah.
But you can let that politeness, you can carry it too far to the point where people will take advantage of you for knowing that you're going to be polite, and so they feel free to wave their religion in your face and say, and just say whatever they want, and they're pretty sure that you won't respond. In fact, it's perfectly likely that a lot of these people have never really heard a response before.
Yeah.
Lots of them have never heard what atheists are all about, except from religious people who have a reason to make you hate atheists.
Yeah. Which is actually one of the hard parts about some people as to why they don't respond when, have you heard the good word about Jesus or whatever. It's because chances are someone's coming up to you with that approach.
Yeah.
They have argued and debated.
Yeah.
Maybe not much, maybe not well, but they've at least got some boilerplate responses to all the different
And a lot of them, if you peel through the first layer, are dumb responses. But,
exactly.
But they sound good.
Exactly. But at least they have that. But if you just walk up on the street and you don't host a TV show on atheism, and you haven't, looked at the arguments and talked with a lot of people, then you might not, you may just have to fall back on I just don't believe because I just don't see evidence.
And if you never hear, if you never argue with people, then you won't get any practice.
Exactly.
And that's the only way to get good at it. I remember when I was in college, these guys like Reverend Brother Jed or something like that, and this guy named Cliff would always be on campus. And I heard students arguing against him. Most people seemed to dislike him, but I noticed that the students' arguments were actually pretty bad.
Yeah.
It takes practice, just like anything else.
Yeah.